Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alejandro Moledo, and I'm Head of Policy at the European Disability Forum. We are very happy to have you here in this training on inclusive publishing and EPUB, organized by the European Disability Forum in cooperation with the DAISY Consortium. This webinar, this training, as any webinar or training we organize at EDF, is accessible with international sign language interpretation and live captioning. You can activate the live subtitling using the function in Zoom, or you can click on the link that is being shared in the chat. If you have any question during the training concerning the contents or concerning what we will be discussing today, you can use the Q&A function on Zoom. You can find it in the menu. Or if you have any technical question about the subtitles or something that is not working for you, you can ask this more technical question in the chat. This webinar, this training will be recorded and it will be made available on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. We will also share with you this presentation that may be slightly adapted based on your questions in shortly after the end of this training. So these were the housekeeping rules that are you all aware of by now, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this training. As you know, the European Disability Forum, EDF, we've been working always to mainstream accessibility, and one of the key campaigns that our members and EDF we've been advocating for many years, being to ensure that publishing books are accessible to persons with disabilities, for people with print disabilities. And in this regard, we've been working, as you know, on important policies in this regard, such as the Marrakesh Treaty or the European Accessibility Act. We can talk about this if you want during the Q&A part of the webinar, but today we are here to learn about inclusive publishing, and one of the formats that is becoming the default format for electronic books, which is more accessible for persons with disabilities, and this is EPUB. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Orme, who will be leading the training today. He's the Chief Executive of the DAISY Consortium, a good friend of EDF and a good friend of the disability community, working on accessibility for many years, and he will be guiding us through this training. So Richard, the floor is yours, and many thanks for having this training with us.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you to EDF. It's wonderful to be partners with your great organization. And thank you to the people who have come along to this session today. So let's set some questions and some expectations in an overview. So do books and other publications need to be a barrier for persons with print disabilities? Well, resoundingly and encouragingly, the answer is no. So let's learn about the encouraging changes that are happening in the publishing industry, about the EPUB format, and how anyone can create and read accessible ebooks, indeed from their word processor. And let's get a sense of the agenda of what we're going to do over this next hour. First of all, I'll just introduce you a little bit more to the DAISY Consortium, and then we'll talk about the Born Accessible revolution in publishing. We'll talk about EPUB, which is the publishing industry's ebook format with built-in accessibility. We'll pause at that point for questions and answers, and we'll spend as much time as we can within that before we move to some demos, and we'll show how we can make your own EPUB, and we'll also talk a little bit about some popular EPUB reading apps, the applications that you can use on your computer, tablet, or smartphone for reading EPUB. Then we'll have a final Q&A before a closing session. So a little bit about the DAISY Consortium then. So we are a non-profit organization, a membership association, and we are working towards equal access to information and knowledge regardless of disability. And the members of our organization include special libraries for visually impaired and otherwise print disabled people, also disability groups, government agencies, and universities. We have more than 150 organizations in our family in more than 70 countries, and we were founded in 1996. And so we have more than 20 years effort working on expanding the availability of accessible publishing and reading. But actually, we like to say we have hundreds of years of experience and hard work across our member organizations who are adapting books and working now with the publishing industry so they can produce accessible books themselves. We are registered in Zurich, Switzerland, but our team members are based across Europe and beyond, in Belgium, Brazil, Canada, France, India and Kenya, the UK, where I'm speaking from, the USA, and Vietnam. So we're a very international and global organization. Now, you may be familiar with DAISY, and for many people who have been around for some time, what they think of when they think of DAISY is maybe someone who is listening to a book using a DAISY player. And so we have an image on this screen of an older lady sitting in a comfortable armchair, smiling as she listens to a book on a DAISY player. In this case, it's one that has a CD in it, as she listens through her headphones. And I have a book cover on this page, which is George Orwell's 1984. So she's enjoying a book, but it's a book that's been made specially available for people with print disabilities. And this is how it used to be and still will be for some time. When a book is published, special organizations will create accessible versions of that book parallel and in addition to the publishing industry for people with print disabilities. But this lady maybe had to wait for some time for the book to be available to her. If someone wanted to read in large print or in Braille, they may also have to wait after the book has been published, or it may never be produced in their chosen accessible format. On the next slide, we see another lady, and she's reading a book on an iPad. She's visually impaired, and the book she's reading is Great Expectations. So this shows the promise of born accessible, inclusive publishing in being able to deliver that dream we've had for those that have worked in this sector for so many years, which is for this lady to be able to read the same book as someone without a print disability at the same time, at the same price, so she doesn't have to pay extra for this special version of the book, and in the same place. So she's actually going to the same stores, the same library systems, and reading that book. And how on earth could this happen then? How could we get to this magical place? And that's through the Born Accessible revolution. So maybe this is a silly question, but who needs to read? Well, people who need a bigger font, a larger print, they need to read, of course. People with low vision, people who are dyslexic or need learning tools, such as Read Aloud, people who are blind, who may use a screen reader or refreshable Braille, a digital Braille display, people with a physical disability who find it hard to hold a book or turn the pages of a book. And you know, we might as well include them as well, people without disabilities. They also need to read. And what would be great is all of these people with these different requirements are all able to read the same publication in the same workflow, as it were. And the good news is that the Born Accessible Inclusive Publishing ecosystem is within reach. And for some people, it's already here. Let me break this down a little bit. So inclusive publishing means that the published materials are available to everyone, just as we talk about inclusive design. Born accessible means that when a publication is born digital, which means it's created as a digital product, it's also born accessible at the same time. So it's part of the production process. And ecosystem, here we're recognizing that in order for this to work, it's not just about the publication itself, it's about the app that one might use to read it, that working well with assistive technology, if someone is using assistive technology, and that these accessible publications are easy to discover, find, purchase, and borrow. So the great news is that this is all possible because of modern digital publishing, and we see this accelerated, of course, in the last 2 years or so because of COVID. We're familiar with this story, aren't we? With things becoming more digital. And the publishing industry is moving to digital solutions. And what do they need as an industry? They need technologies that will work reliably through the different distribution systems. No longer do they have a product that is just a physical book that goes into a warehouse. They have digital content in the form of ebooks that go out to lots and lots of different distribution platforms. Amazon and Google, Kobo and Redshelf, Vital Source, and many, many, many more. They want to make sure that what they produce is a great experience for people with and without disabilities, and that can be read on all sorts of different platforms, on computers, on tablets, smartphones, and even smart speakers. So they don't want to produce a different version of these publications for the different retailers or library systems. They want to produce it once, and they also would love that file to be able to work across all of these different devices. And they want technologies that will evolve with newer technologies as they come along, so our smart speakers and so on. So the born accessible publications, these are the same edition and accessible from day one, suitable for reading online through website technology, but also offline when you no longer have a connection. And the great news is by using the EPUB format, they are built on the foundation of the web and all the great accessibility progress that has been made there using all those same technologies. So as I mentioned, the foundation for digital publishing is EPUB. It's the format that was developed by the publishing industry. And I'll tell a little bit of history here. So initially, when ebook technology came along, the DAISY Consortium was at the table, making sure that accessibility was included in the open ebook format, as it was called then. But unfortunately, what happened is the publishing industry locked up a lot of that content with what we call digital rights management, and it prevented some accessibility in many cases. Then this standard evolved into what was called EPUB 2, and this was great for novels and simple content, but really wasn't so suitable for the more challenging content, such as educational materials. And so along, more than 11 years ago, came EPUB 3, and that now is able to work with all sorts of publications, including more complex materials, and has lots of great accessibility features baked in. So now we see that most ebooks are produced in this EPUB format, and in the US, more than 80% of higher education textbooks are made in EPUB and read in EPUB. There are textbook platforms such as Vital Source and Redshelf that are used for the education sector, And these have, for example, around 1 million EPUBs between them. And those platforms that you may be using yourselves, Apple has books, Amazon has Kindle, Kobo, and Google Play Books. They have millions of ebooks which are EPUB format. So it's already here, it's already there. This isn't something I'm telling you that it's coming soon. And more than ebooks, journal platforms, which would be used in a university setting, these increasingly offer the ability to read journal articles through the website. And for downloading those publications, they would offer an EPUB download option. EPUB is maintained by the W3C, which is the organization that looks after the standards of the web. And as the web technologies evolve, so too will EPUB evolve. So it'll keep maintained and improved along with the web. And because EPUB is built on the same technologies that build the web, we've got this great opportunity for accessibility. So I'm a great believer in showing things, not just talking about them. And we've got lots of great videos on the DAISY website. So I thought for this training, I might show something a little bit different. One of the great powers of an accessible publication, as we learn through the experience of developing the DAISY format, is navigation. People love the ability, need the ability to be able to navigate around a publication. And the good news is that great navigation is built into good ebooks. And so I'll show a video which has captions of the features of navigation within a digital publication. So let me just switch to that now. And I will move that to the correct screen. And I will start the video playing.
Navigating in a digital publication. When we first open a print book, the table of contents can give us a good sense of what's in the publication. It's no different with a digital publication. For someone using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, a good table of contents is essential to understanding what's in the title and how it's organized.
Table of contents, cover, endorsements, title page, dedication, contents, list of figures and tables.
For more complex titles, the table of contents with chapters and subheadings is like adding a superpower, useful for everyone, but especially for those with print disabilities. And after providing a wonderful orientation to the publication, the table of contents can be used to jump straight to a specific part of the book.
Chapter 1. Different futuring for different needs. People need a motivating vision of what comes next and the awareness that more will happen after that the future is a process.
Once in a chapter, the correctly formatted heading and subheading structure allows a switch user or a screen reader user to quickly navigate forwards and backwards, and that's really helpful. In this example, the assistive technology is able to use the properly produced ebook to generate a list of headings.
Tree view, different futuring for different needs,
so that a blind user can rapidly jump to any of the subsections.
Different intensities of focus 4 of 14 level. Different intensities of focus link heading level 2. For most people, understand.
A very common way to reference a place within a publication is page numbers. And in accessible ebooks, we can use these too. Imagine a child with blindness sitting in a class with non-disabled students and their teacher. The teacher may ask the class to open page 29 of their textbook.
Page 29. Using open tools for open questions, our experience has proven to us that, with a baseline of
accessible digital book, the student with blindness can independently turn to the same page as the rest of the class and start reading. They may even get there faster. Following the guidelines for accessible publishing for digital publications means including these and other navigation features that benefit everyone but are essential for an equitable reading experience for people with print disabilities.
Okay, so that was a demo of reading in ebooks and showed the navigation features there, and in doing so also demonstrated reading with a screen reader. Now, when people talk about accessibility, sometimes they kind of think just about people who are blind, and of course that's very important. But we know, of course, that people with disabilities have many different and diverse needs. And one of the great things about digital publishing and the EPUB format is the ability for people to be able to change visually how something is looking on the screen. This is useful for people with low vision, for people with dyslexia and other learning disabilities. So I'll show a video next about visual adjustments in EPUB. I'm just noting that currently we have no questions in the Q&A, and we'll be stopping for questions in a short while. So be thinking about the questions you might have. Okay, so I'm going to move to the video on visual adjustments. And I'll make that full screen and start that video.
Visual adjustments. For many people with print disabilities, the visual presentation of a publication can make a huge difference to how easy it is to read and understand the content. This not only affects people with visual impairments, but also people with dyslexia, ADHD, photophobia, and other conditions. Fortunately, modern publishing technologies provide each of us with the ability to make visual adjustments according to our individual requirements. One important feature is adjusting the size of the text. This works especially well in an EPUB publication or on a responsive website because the text dynamically adjusts to fit within the available space. Colours and contrast can also be critical, and accessible publishing technologies will allow for a variety of themes. People with visual impairment may need a high contrast, as provided by black text on a white background. However, if they need to avoid glare, then white on black, often referred to as dark mode, may be preferable. Conversely, many people with specific reading difficulties such as dyslexia need a low contrast experience, and an option such as sepia will be helpful. Many people find that some typefaces are easier to see or maximize their ability to process and understand text. Accessible reading experiences will enable the reader to choose from a range of fonts, including serif and sans serif options, and some even offer specific fonts designed for people with dyslexia or low vision. As well as customizing the size and colors, some people really benefit from adjusting some aspects of the layout. This can include increasing the line spacing and increasing the margins to achieve a shorter line length. These accessibility features are widely implemented in modern reading technologies. Having been initially included for people with disabilities, visual adjustments benefit everyone. These days, people read digital publications on a wide variety of devices, including e-readers, smartphones, tablets, laptops, all the way up to desktop computers with widescreen displays. We may be reading in the office, at home, outside in the sunshine, or on an airplane with the lights turned down. People with print disabilities rely on these visual adjustments to make reading accessible, but with digital reading becoming more common, everyone benefits from having the option to adjust the display to suit their requirements.
Okay, so I'm hoping I'm demonstrating that with inclusive publishing, we get some wonderful benefits, and imagine then these books becoming available, people having the skills and the technologies to be able to use them, and having access, as I mentioned, to the same book on the same day at the same price and in the same place. But how, though, will people know whether or not the ebooks that they're discovering in the ebook stores or in the library system are going to work for them? Do they have the accessibility features? Because just like the web, we can have accessible ebooks, and we can have books where someone hasn't paid attention to the accessibility. Maybe there are images that are not described in there, and so on. So the good news here is that EPUB has accessibility metadata. Metadata is data about products and other things. And a couple of examples are that an EPUB publication can indicate whether it is screen reader friendly, for example. And indeed, the publisher may have added an accessibility summary in there too. I have a nice little video that describes this, and this is what I will show next. So I'll make this full screen and start the video playing. This is a short video.
Accessibility metadata. When a publisher has taken steps to ensure their publications are accessible, they'll want to make sure that this is communicated in the market, and including accessibility-related information within a publication's metadata can be really useful to readers with disabilities and people making purchasing decisions for an institution such as a library or university. In this example, we found a title in the catalogue on the Red Shelf platform, and prominently displayed on the information page is an accessibility tab. When I select this, the first thing I see is that this book is screen reader friendly. So if I'm a blind person or a librarian checking out a title for someone who uses a screen reader, this piece of information will be very helpful. I can click on the See All Accessibility Metadata button to see the details. Here it's mentioned that the book has accessible math, a table of contents, print equivalent page numbers, and alt text and long descriptions for images. This same title is available on the VitalSource platform. Here too, all the accessibility metadata is included in a tab on the book information page. I can see the accessibility specifications that this book conforms to, and that it's been certified by Benetech under their GCA program. With accessibility metadata becoming increasingly common and more visible on distribution platforms, it has become an important element in accessible publishing, ensuring that accessible titles can easily be discovered by customers. It helps an individual with disabilities decide if a book will be easy to read, considering their individual needs, and it provides useful criteria to an organisation to help them comply with purchasing policies or indeed legal requirements.
Okay, so it may seem a bit dull, especially with all this exciting stuff I was able to show you of an ebook being read with a screen reader, of being able to navigate around it so easily, to be able to adjust the visual layout and everything like that. Why would I be talking about this boring thing called accessibility metadata? This will increasingly be important, particularly in Europe, as we move towards the magic date of June 2025, when publishers will be required, if they want to sell into the European market, that their ebooks are accessible and that their ebook reading systems are accessible too. But how will people know whether or not they're reading an ebook that is or isn't accessible? And we believe it'll be really important for people to be able to buy and borrow with confidence. So watch out for that accessibility metadata and be asking about it. So in this first section, we've talked about the DAISY Consortium. We've talked about the model of producing specialist publications, but then the publishers themselves taking responsibility for making sure their digital publications are accessible. We've talked about the history of EPUB and what it's based on, and what we mean by the accessible publishing ecosystem. And I've done some demonstrations through showing you the videos we've made of great navigation, screen reader access, visual adjustments, and accessibility metadata. So before we turn to looking at making EPUB, why don't we spend some time in Q&A and be happy to explain things that I've not explained well or missed out. Let's have a conversation now.
Thank you very much, Richard, for this this introduction. It was great. I see questions are coming, and I also have some for you in case there is still time. I see that there was one which arrived on the chat concerning. Let me just get it. Yeah. So it's from Bangladesh. We have audience all around the world today, and it's about the. Sorry, I lost it again. Bear me with me. What is it? Yeah, here it is. So the question is about the EPUB apparently is coming as a new format for certain publishers, and one of their concerns is about documents which may contain a lot of tables. And I guess here we can also think of graphs and visual elements which may make the publication a little bit more difficult. And you briefly mentioned also in your presentation, math, for example. Books about math may be also very challenging. So how EPUB address these challenges on tables, graphs, math symbols, and so forth?
Sure. So thank you, Salma, for the question. In the question, you specifically mentioned tables. Well, tables can be made accessible on the web in HTML, and there are some simple techniques that are used. And some consideration sometimes needs to be made of the tables, such as not merging cells together and indicating where the headers are and this kind of thing. And these very same practices just come across into EPUB, because EPUB is at its very core like web pages within a book format. So if those tables can be made accessible on the web, they can also be made accessible within EPUB. And then the assistive technologies that people use will work exactly in the same way as people who would read a table on the web too. The production systems for making EPUB, they also will support the production of accessible tables. So this shouldn't be too tricky. One of the things that I will now add into the useful links slide, which will add to this deck, will point towards a knowledge base which explains in detail how to address some of these more technical issues. There are links to the standards and links to code snippets and those sorts of things as well. Then Alejandro, you broaden the question out to what about more complex stuff? So what I'm so excited about is not just access to novels and what we call trade books, simple books. Access to this really is, it should just be a given. But where more complexity is involved, where you have particularly educational materials with graphs, with complex infographics, these sorts of things. And what's brilliant is we see some just amazing examples which are now standard off the production line, particularly of higher educational STEM content, so scientific, technical, mathematical materials, where the publishers are actually building access to these complex objects within their books into their publications. And they can do that because they're using the power of EPUB and the web technologies inside. So as a student is reading through, they might come across a complex image, for which they might have alt text, which is a short description, but they may also be able to get a much longer description of that. And not only text description, that can be very structured too. So there are some great examples of this, and indeed I'll put a link through to a couple of webinars where some of this more complex materials are included. And then specifically on math, so the web technologies, one of the web technologies is called something called MathML. So it used to be that mathematics in a digital publication was just an image of the mathematics expression. Now it's included and described in this language called MathML, and that means that someone who's using a screen reader, listening to the voice, or using with Braille, for example, they're able to explore that math expression in some detail, like through a tree structure. And so mathematics can be more accessible than really it ever has been in mainstream publications.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. I see that there are some more questions coming through the Q&A function. There is one from David concerning the acronyms and abbreviations, which may mean different things depending on how we read them, such as M, for example, which may mean miles, millions, meters, etc. But I think this is a matter of bad writing, to be honest. I don't think EPUB can solve this this aspect, and I think it's also the responsibility of the editor of that specific text to write it in such a way that is understandable for the audience. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit harsh to say it's bad writing.
Well, I was a little bit harsh, yes.
So just as EPUB and digital publications have all the benefits of, say, reading on the web, they have all the same weaknesses maybe. So these abbreviations that may be read out. So there's one, I know my brother's address, it mentions rupees because it comes across the letters R and S, and it thinks it's being clever in thinking that's the word rupees, the Indian currency. There are techniques for publishers to be able to explain how a word should be published, so it should be pronounced, but this is not widely used. So yeah, you'll have the same kind of quirks if you're using text-to-speech or read aloud. And so because publishers are more aware of accessibility, at least they test some of these things out and they adjust the way that they include some of the editorial content so it reads aloud better, for example.
Yeah, and try to make the text understandable as well. There is another question whether EPUB, and I think this is a very important aspect for us, for organizations, whether EPUB can also be a good format for shorter texts. So not talking here about books, but for example, a brochure of four-page information, leaflet, etc.
Sure.
That now is provided usually, or organizations, we tend to provide it in PDF or Word document. Would this be a potential format for, a potential document to be using EPUB format?
For sure, and if we have time, we'll show how we can quickly make an EPUB. So often people these days will publish their materials on the web, and that's great because people are familiar with discovering something and reading it through their browser. But if you want to read it offline, then you want to download a document format, and that's where people will often offer PDF, Word, and maybe EPUB. I showed the video of visual adjustments, which showed how when the text was enlarged, the text wrapped. So this is something so reading a PDF on a mobile phone for someone who is low vision or has regular vision can be really horrible. Whereas if they're reading an EPUB, they're able to change the font size so it works for them. So for that use case, if you're downloading something and reading it on a device like that, then yes, it's great, and it's very, very fast and easy to make an EPUB from a word processed document, as we'll see in a while. Yeah, choice is a good thing. So offer more than one format is what I would say.
Exactly. This is what we will try also in EDF, to provide our reports not only in PDF or in Word document, but also we'll try to increase the number of reports we provide also in EPUB. So there is also a question about, which I think you will tackle later, Richard, about the Epub Reader. Whether it's possible to read EPUBs directly on phones, tablets, etc., and computers without having to install an additional software. Some of them, they include already a reader, but some of them you may need to download a reader. But Richard, you will talk about this in the second part, right?
I promise.
Okay, good. So I go to the next question, which I think I can quickly answer because it's my cup of tea and my everyday life, let's say, which is, you mentioned, Richard, that by 2025, ebooks must be accessible in the European Union. This is because of the European Accessibility Act that I mentioned at the beginning. Does that mean that publishing PDF materials will have legal issues? Well, obviously PDFs don't have the capabilities that an EPUB format may have, but what is important is to bear in mind that the mandatory legal requirements which are in the Accessibility Act, this is what really matters for compliance. The Commission has initiated a standardization process, so to come up with standards for all the products and services of the European Accessibility Act, except for the ebooks, because the Commission considers that EPUB can be used instead of replicating and repeating let's say the creation of EPUB, they will refer to it as a technical specification, and therefore this will demonstrate compliance with the Accessibility Act. So what is important for the PDF files is whether they can or not comply with the legal requirements in the Accessibility Act, in the annex of the Accessibility Act. And many of the requirements are the ones that Richard was mentioning during this first part. The fact that the document, you can navigate the document, the fact of not only the navigation, but also the metadata, for example, is one of the requirements. So as long as the PDF is considered an ebook and complies with these requirements, it will be in line with the legislation. I hope this answered the question. And I see that there was another one. Okay, no, this is solved. And okay, what should be a standard EPUB must contain? I think that's, I don't know, Richard, if you can answer that broad question, what should be a standard EPUB?
Why don't we cover that, because we're about to make some EPUB. So
okay,
if we have a second Q&A session, so we can do a quick view of those that have not yet been answered at the end of that. So
okay, so I suggest we go to this final demo, and then we'll take it from there.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks
thank you for those questions, and thank you for moderating the questions so beautifully there, Alejandro. So we've learned a little bit about what EPUB is, and we've had some experience of reading it, but what about actually making it? And publishing industry, in some places, very technical, there's lots involved, and the publishers will either be making their own books, using specialist software. Sometimes they've developed their own systems, the big publishers, and one very widely used publishing software is called Adobe Indesign, and this is used to create ebooks, other publications, brochures and reports and so on. It's a very technical piece of software. It's quite daunting. This too will create EPUB, and the DAISY Consortium and other folk are working with Adobe, actually partly in preparation for the European Accessibility Act, to improve further the accessibility of the EPUB from InDesign. But unless you have money and lots of skills, you won't be using InDesign. So how could you, in your organizations, as an individual, even as a blind author, create EPUB? So you can also create EPUBs using common word processors. In Google Docs, for example, it's ever so simple. You just go to File, Download as EPUB, and your document will be made into an EPUB. And in Pages, which is the free word processing software on the Apple Mac and on iPad and iPhone too, this also has the ability to export to EPUB, and you would save it as EPUB 3, and that will create EPUB for you. However, the world's most popular word processor, Microsoft Word, I think they claim more than 1 billion users. This does not itself have a built-in EPUB export, but the good news is that there is a free plugin for you to be able to produce really good EPUB from Microsoft Word. At the DAISY Consortium, we work with lots of organizations, teaching them how to make accessible books, lots of non-profit organizations all around the world in lots of different languages, with lots of complex content like math and images and tables, and they're using Word and this add-in to create really good EPUB. So why don't we have a go at doing that? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a document that I've downloaded from the EDF website. And I probably should have asked for permission for this demo, but there we go. It's all open available things. So can I find the document? Here we are. So I'm opening this in Word. So I just, this could be a document you've produced yourselves. Hopefully this looks familiar to our EDF colleagues. This is quite a complex document on creating Word documents. It's full of images and lots of other good stuff. So this is it just downloaded from the EDF website. And the first thing to say is that if you have a really good Word document, you can create really good EPUB. And if you have a really bad Word document where you haven't actually marked the headings and you haven't given alt text and this kind of thing, then you're not going to end up with a good EPUB. So the first thing you'd want to do is know about making accessible Word documents, and you'd want to run the accessibility checker as an absolute minimum. But beyond that, here I am in regular Word, and I've got this little add-in which is called Word to EPUB loaded and installed. So it just creates an extra button on my toolbar on the home ribbon, and you can also just run it straight from as an app or straight from File Explorer. So I've just opened this document and I'm clicking on the button that says Word to EPUB. It analyzes the languages and other elements of the document. And I've got it working in expert mode because I do lots of fun things with it, but you might be using it in simple mode. In expert mode, I can do things such as adding some of that metadata we were just talking about. You can play around with what you would use for your cover image, and you can even generate your own cover image from within this tool. You've got various options around languages and the page direction and how you're going to construct the table of contents. You can define how you're going to pick up the page numbers. You have some different styling and so on. But let's go back to the simple mode. So all I've done is clicked on Word to EPUB, and now I'm just going to click the OK button, and it will make my EPUB for me. So this is, to say again, a Word document that I've just downloaded from the EDF website, and I've clicked on Word to EPUB and OK, and I have my EPUB made for me. Now, it's given me an error or a warning telling me that there are images without descriptions detected. This is a training document, so that's probably been included as part of that, but it'll give you some helpful warnings and things if it tells you that you've got some missing heading levels or something like that in there. Now, I'm actually going to just go ahead and open. Now, we had a couple of questions. One question was, what is the minimum that needs to be in an EPUB? And there was another about accessibility. So just to mention that one of the great things about EPUB is that there are tools to help publishers and you make good EPUB. One is the ability to check whether your EPUB is valid, which means you know then it will work in lots of different apps and so on. So this is called Epub Check. It's actually maintained by the DAISY Consortium under contract to W3C. And so that running Epub Check will make sure that your EPUB is valid. At the DAISY Consortium, we've also produced an accessibility checker for EPUB. That's called ACE. And this will conduct automated checking on the EPUB, looking for common accessibility issues with it. And it helps someone check whether the EPUB is accessible, for example, by extracting the images and their image descriptions so they can easily be checked. Also looking at the heading order and so on. So there's a couple of free tools there, Epub Check and ACE, that makes it easier for publishers and for you to check that what you're doing is okay. We would also recommend that someone would check within a reading system that everything looks as they would expect. So I'm now going to launch a reading app with this EPUB that I've just made live in this webinar. It's opened on the wrong screen, so I will just move to the right screen. And here's that as an EPUB. This reading app is called Thorium, and I'll include a link to this, and in fact, I'll mention it in a moment. But for example, if I go to the table of contents, we can see that Word to EPUB has extracted all the heading structure from the Word document and is producing a really nice table of contents, which is hierarchical, which means I can quickly jump between the different sections and subsections and navigate around this EPUB really, really easily. And I also have the benefits of EPUB, such as I can change the colors, I can change the text size, which is I'm doing now live. I can change the spacing and all that kind of great stuff. So someone might like to read that document that was on the EDF website in Word, and that might work for them. But within an EPUB, they're able to do, for example, some of these visual adjustments, which are difficult within Word. And I could use the read aloud feature and so on in this. So that's how easy it was to create an EPUB from Word. It's not how most publishers would produce EPUB. As I mentioned, they'd be using specialist software, but you can create EPUB for yourself using Word to EPUB or the built-in features of Pages and Google Docs. So there's a link in the slide deck as to how you get hold of Word to EPUB and install it on your Windows computer. So now if I go back to the presentation, the last thing we're going to cover is reading apps. So if you're going to read a Word document, you're going to read that in Word, almost in all cases. But EPUB is a little bit different in that if you have an EPUB that is not kind of locked down by a particular vendor, you've got lots of choices of different apps where you can read that EPUB, just as you've got a choice of different browsers. And different apps have different strengths for different people. So fortunately, I'm going to tell you that there's a web page which is listed on this screen, which is inclusivepublishing.org/apps, where there's a roundup of lots of different reading apps and what they offer for people around accessibility. But I've also got the icons of 4 that I might mention just as giving an overview. So the first is an app from a company called Dolphin, and it's Dolphin Easyreader. And maybe some people on this call already are using Easyreader for accessing the books from the specialist library in the country where you are. Easyreader will directly connect to lots and lots of libraries, but you can also use it to read an EPUB on your mobile phone if you're using Android or iOS, and also on your Windows computer. And in Easyreader, you can do all of those fun things, such as changing fonts and using read aloud, changing the colors and so on. Another example of one of those apps is one called Collibrio. And again, there are links to all of these on that web page I mentioned earlier. Collibrio is available on Android, and they also have a web app. So you're able to visit the website without installing any software and read the EPUB that you've just made using their great solution called their vanilla reader, just to try that out. and they have that technology and license it to publishers and platforms. And so they're now adopting that very accessible reader. And so you see how, by being based on this non-proprietary, on these web technologies, accessibility flows right through the ecosystem. So thanks a lot to the developers of these apps and the way that they license these to the mainstream industry. A good example of that would be the next app I have here, which is Thorium Reader. You saw me using that with the EPUB I made just there. Thorium is made in Europe. It's made by EDR Lab in France, which is the European Digital Reading Lab. And Thorium Reader is free, it's open source, it's localized to different languages, and this works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And then the last one is made entirely by a commercial organization for their own ebook platform. It's available across lots of different platforms such as iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and more. It's a commercial app, and they've built lots of accessibility into it to make use of all the accessibility that the publishers are putting into their books. So it has support, for example, for read aloud, so that you don't need to, if you're someone with dyslexia or someone with low vision, the book will read aloud to you using the synthetic voice. And if the images have descriptions, which hopefully they do, you have the option of them being read aloud to you as well. So you see how accessibility is really being picked up by the publishing industry, and they're seeing that as something that they want to put into their products. Something is important to say is that at the end of the day, the experience of accessibility that someone has is a combination of the reading app, being the app that suits them and having the features they want, of the content, the publication, being developed with accessibility in mind. So having good navigational structure, image descriptions, tables are properly marked up, and so on. And lastly, the assistive technology working with that combination of the app and the content too. We do lots of testing of these combinations, and you could read more about those at the Reading System Roundup at inclusivepublishing.org/apps. So in this second segment, we've seen a demonstration of making an EPUB. It was over really quickly because it's very straightforward to do if you have a good document. And we've talked about reading apps too. So in the last few minutes, why don't we switch back to Q&A?
Thanks a lot, Richard. And I see a very interesting question, and I think we won't have much time for more, but please feel free to send us if we don't have much more time, and we'll try to answer you by email. There is a question from Maria. Is it possible to integrate this reader software into your website so that your visitors can immediately access the EPUBs without having to download a reader app in their devices? I believe some Apple, for example, they have a reader of EPUBs by default, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me, Richard. And in the case of Android or Windows operating system, I think in that case you will need to download the reader, because I don't know if any web browser, for example, can render the EPUB by itself. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the kind of website is doing the work, but yes, it doesn't matter whether you're using a mobile or a desktop computer. Your website can be enabled to give that EPUB reading experience. So that one that I mentioned, Collibrio, as well as having what we call native apps, you also have a web-based reading app. So that's where you would look at the vanilla. So when you go to the Collibrio website, for example, you're not downloading an app, you're running it on their website. And Red Shelf is browser-based, VitalSource has a cloud-based solution, Playbooks from Google has a cloud-based solution. So yes, it is possible to do that.
That's great. And yeah, and I see that Pietro was sharing on the chat that you can export into EPUB using the LibreOffice software, which is open source software.
Yep.
Is there any other, Richard, that you can export to?
Oh, there are various. Because it's kind of using web-based technology, often the web-based word processing solutions have some kind of support. LibreOffice has its own kind of basic EPUB support, but actually Word to EPUB also works within LibreOffice. It has its own toolbar. You'll actually get better results if you use Word to EPUB than using the built-in solution. Similarly, you can actually use Word to EPUB with Google Docs documents too. So this is actually, it's all built into the help. We're not selling Word to EPUB, it's available for free, but this is just a statement. We would love to work with the guys behind LibreOffice to improve the support there, but we've not been successful in finding the resources to do that. So yeah, so they're completely free. Write in LibreOffice, use Word to EPUB. You can make free EPUB, which you can then read in a free EPUB reader.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Free is great.
Free is great indeed. Well, on that note, I think we are about to close the training of today. Just remember, I think this is a main takeaway for all of us, for organizations, to create accessible documents. Obviously, we've been advocating for this, but also to propose more formats which can be more accessible to people with disabilities, and having this good basis of creating a good Word format, for example, and then from that you can offer not only the web version or a PDF, but also an EPUB, so you increase the availability of accessible formats that can be of great use for many people. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you all participants for your great questions and your comments on the chat. As mentioned at the beginning, we will make this training available, and if anything, any doubt, don't hesitate to send it to us. And I would also like to thank the sign language interpreters and the captioner and my colleague Raquel for organizing and supporting this training, and obviously to Richard for his great intervention and his great.
It was a lot of fun. I would just add one more very short thing,
please.
Which is daisy.org/EAA is a place where you can learn about the European Accessibility Act and sign up to a mailing list. The conversation about accessible ebooks in Europe will be one that will be going on for some time. So come and join the conversation there. You can lurk. So that's daisy.org/EAA, and come and join the conversation there. And I will be adding links based on the questions we received into this deck. So hopefully that's useful for people to follow up. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all. See you next time. Bye-bye.